Hello, everyone. Dr. Stringer here this week talking about police recruitment, selection, and training. For those of you that see these little links on here, when I teach this class face-to-face, I start the class a lot of times with one of these, either the Get Up Challenge or one of those videos that the police do when they're singing and dancing and stuff, because it's kind of funny. But I can't play it for you all because you won't be able to hear it because I'm using the microphone with the earbuds. Otherwise, I would, because you guys might find it to be funny. But maybe if you guys want to, I'll post them on D2L or something. Y'all can watch them. Just let me know. Anyway, so to get into the recruitment of police officers. So there's a lot that goes on to recruiting, especially nowadays, because we're not just having a whole lot of people come to the police and be like, hey, I want to be a police officer. So they're having to do a little bit more with going to job fairs and events and stuff like that. And so, they have community service officers and police explorer programs to help with that too. They also have target groups that they're trying to, get to apply. So if you fit one of these or multiple of these, then obviously it's going to help. So women, racial, ethnic minorities, military veterans, multilingual persons is a real big one. It's not quite as much around here, but there's some areas where if you don't speak Spanish fluently, they're not going to hire you as a police officer. So if you are bilingual, then that's certainly going to help. Four-year college degree graduates usually get a little bit of preference. And then experienced police officers is another big one. So these are the big target groups. The average salary, the starting salary is about $44,000 in the United States. Being in Metro Atlanta, it's usually about $10,000 more than that because our cost of living is a little bit higher. If you think about it, it's a lot more expensive to live here than it would be in rural Alabama. Anyway, so just to move on through this a little bit, some of the benefits. You don't have to pay for the academy to go to the academy. The department pays for that. They usually give you a uniform or equipment allowance, and then tuition reimbursement if you go to school, sign-on bonuses, gym membership. They'll usually give you some certain allowance of bullets every month. I think most departments that I've heard of give you like a box of 50 every month just so you can keep up your marksmanship, because that's important. The permanence of selection decisions. So once police officers are hired, a few officers really leave. They tend to stay. With the exception of Atlanta right now, which is having a big turnover issue, most officers stay where they are. Then again, Atlanta's always had a turnover issue, and they're always hiring because a lot of officers will go to Atlanta, and then they'll get their training, and then they can go off to any other department in Georgia, and they're already a Georgia certified police officer, so they don't have to be trained, which puts them rung above those people that are new. So if you're interested in getting into policing, getting into one of these departments that's always hiring can be a good way to get your foot in the door and get your training, and then you can go elsewhere if you wanted to later on. I actually had a friend, and most of the time this is not the case, but I had a friend who lived in Virginia, and his wife got a job in Pennsylvania, and they moved to Pennsylvania, and usually they'll make you redo your training if you're going from a state to state because your certification is only good for that state. But Pennsylvania actually waived that, and they allowed him to go to Pennsylvania, and they gave him the certification there without repeating the academy and everything in Pennsylvania. They just accepted his credentials from Virginia. So it is possible and pretty interesting that happens. So they do have some affirmative action policies to get more disabled women and minorities into policing to correct past discrimination issues. Most departments require 21 years of age, valid driver's license, no felony convictions, U.S. citizen, height is proportionate to weight. And I've got, I don't know, let's see if I can show you all the GIPSTIC requirements, if it'll work. So here's just looking at, JIPSTIC, and this is Georgia Public Safety Training Center. You guys can go and look at that if you want to. This just talks about the main officer training, high school diploma, background investigation, all that kind of stuff. So, there's JIPSTIC, and the DEA requirements are a little bit more stringent, I believe. No, it doesn't seem to be working. Oh, okay. Well, I guess the DEA has changed their stuff. Anyway, so these are just some basic requirements. Education is important. You have to have at least a high school diploma, although they do have a preference towards people having more education because, so many people have it nowadays. Criminal record, you can't have any felonies for sure. Now you can't have any domestic violence convictions for sure because they've passed laws to prevent people that are convicted of domestic violence from possessing firearms, which actually resulted in a lot of police officers losing their jobs. But you can have some minor misdemeanors on your record, but not too many, and they can't be too recent. So you want to stay away from that stuff. And a lot of departments I've seen around here will not hire you if you have a past DUI conviction. So that's a big one to watch out for too. Past marijuana possession, you might, that might not be too big of a deal. And it depends on the department. Drug use. So, back where I'm from in Virginia, it's a little bit different than it is down here. So in Virginia, I know several officers who they check their employment application, and it's like, have you ever done cocaine? Yes. Have you ever taken prescription pills that weren't yours? Yes. Have you ever smoked marijuana? Yes. And they were hired as police officers because they were honest about it. However, even if you have, smoked some marijuana, most departments want to see at least a year. You haven't smoked any marijuana in the last year. Some departments say 5 years. Stuff like that. So for those of you that are interested in going into policing when you graduate, if you might want to think about what you're doing at those parties on Friday and Saturday night. I heard Thursday night's a big one too. So, try to think about that because, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, they're not going to have a test that'll pick that up or whatever. Well, believe it or not, the hair test nowadays can actually get back pretty far. To be honest, they won't even need that because they'll ask you on the polygraph examination. And one thing that I like to tell students when I'm talking about recruitment and stuff like that is too, when it comes to these things, do not lie on your application. If you've smoked marijuana, tell them, yes, I've smoked marijuana. And that gets back to my point with the officers that I know that, had used cocaine and marijuana and taken prescription pills. They were hired because they were honest about it. Had they lied and said, no, I've never done these things, and then they asked them on the polygraph, they wouldn't have gotten the job because they'd lied. So they will immediately disqualify you if they find that you've been dishonest on anything in your application. So if you've used marijuana in your lifetime, say yes. Don't lie about it because when they do the polygraph, if they find out you were lying, you're done. And just as a side note, now they're not even, a lot of departments are switching from the polygraph to what's called a voice stress test, which picks up stresses in your voice when you're lying and stuff. It's supposed to be a little bit more accurate than the polygraph exam. But anyway, if you guys have any questions about this, just let me know. But you can see here that, in 2013, department requirements for new officers at departments, most, 84% require you to have a high school diploma. Some are requiring a 2-year degree now, though. And these are your departments that can be a little bit more selective. Interestingly, now some departments are actually starting to relax some of their tattoo requirements and their facial hair requirements in order to get more recruits. So that's interesting too. So if you want to go into policing now's the time as far as recruitment was to do it. Um, you usually have a written test. There's no standardized written test. An oral interview, usually done by a panel, background investigation, and they will go into not just your criminal history, your driving record, your tax history, your employment history, your your credit report. All of that stuff is fair game. When people apply to go to federal agencies, the FBI actually comes and even talks to us about students. And so we get FBI agents coming to the office looking for us, and it's like, oh boy. But we know that they're there to talk about another student. So those of you that are thinking about going into these things, keep that in mind too. And these FBI agents can be pretty thorough, and if you've done something, they'll find it. And then the polygraph or the voice stress test. You'll have to undergo a medical exam, vision, hearing, fitness test, psychological evaluation, all that good kind of stuff. Interestingly, the Kennesaw Police Department, they schedule the fitness test, and they do the fitness test as a big group for everybody. And then those people that can pass the fitness test, they give you an application after you pass the fitness test. If you don't pass the fitness test, you don't even get an application to the Kennesaw Police Department. But that might be different somewhere else. I don't know. I don't know other departments that do that. Anyway, so like I said before, women are very underrepresented in policing. So we don't need to go too much into that. Oh, okay. So remember I told you guys it has gotten better over the years. It was on a pretty steep incline for a while, and now it's kind of leveled out around 12%. Anyway. And then, racial minorities in policing is also, very underrepresented as well. Police officer training is about 840 hours. You will take a while. And sometimes they're what they're done at a college or university. Sometimes single police departments have their own academy, which was more the way it was back when I lived in Virginia. Each department kind of had their own academy. For those of you that don't know, in Georgia, it's all done by GIPSTIC, which is the Georgia Police Training Academy. I'm trying to think if there's another letter in there that I'm missing. But they actually train the fire departments and other first responders as well. And they do it for the whole state. And then there's various different campuses. The biggest one is over in Forsyth County. So that's where, the big one is, and they have the big, what is it called? The track for emergency vehicle driving and everything, which is pretty neat. Anyway, so this is just looking at types of academies and, numbers of academies across time. Academy training. It's based on various stress versus non-stress types of situations. Firearms, self-defense, physical defense, investigations, report writing, emergency vehicle operation, patrol, mediation, conflict management, so on. And so this is, I don't know if you all can read this, and I think I have this posted on D2L. But this is essentially the post-basic law enforcement training, and this is every single course that you have to go through in the state of Georgia to get certified. And as you can see, there are quite a few, and that's posted on D2L too, because I know y'all probably can't see it that well on here. So I was going to show, I usually show this video of Kyle Dinkheller when we're talking about training, because Kyle Dinkheller was a Lawrence County, Georgia officer who was killed a number of years ago, and it was all caught on video on his dash camera. This video is actually being shown at police academies across the country in training for police officers. But I'm not going to show it to you right now. I might actually make a discussion post for it, and we'll see how that goes. If you all want to do that, you can watch it then. And if you're interested in watching it, I'll post it on D2L too. Anyway, so after you get out of the academy, you're not done. You will have field training after that. And that usually lasts about 12 to 16 weeks. You'll work with what is known as an FTO, which is a field training officer. And this is good because officers you get out of the academy, you might not know exactly, real life training is a whole lot different than it is, in the classroom. So this is just kind of an overview of the Kennesaw Police Department training program. And their field training program lasts for 3 months. They have 40 shifts, and you do 1 to 2 weeks of just orientation where they make sure you've got everything right on your uniform and your belt and all that good kind of stuff, and kind of orient you to the department and all that. And they focus really on what is known as the Reno model of training, which is focused on problem solving and using resources other than the criminal justice system and criminal resources to solve problems within the community. So actually, to complete their training, they have to complete what is called a neighborhood portfolio of one of the districts that outlines some problems and some potential resolutions to these problems. It's a very interesting approach that gets into kind of problem-solving policing, which is something that we'll talk about later on in the course. And so, for example, if you had an area in your jurisdiction where you notice there's a lot of auto accidents, well, of course, as a police officer, you're going to go and take the report, and if anybody's done anything wrong, you might write them a ticket, yada yada yada. But that might not solve the problem. It might be that they need to have a traffic light installed there, or maybe there's a tree that's blocking the stop sign on one side, and it needs to be trimmed or something like that. And so this gets officers into kind of this thinking outside of the box framework that a lot of officers end up stuck in, which is, okay, here's a problem, someone's doing this, we'll arrest them, we'll write them a ticket. Like, those are the go-to things that, people tend to learn and that police officers go to, but there's so many other resources that are potentially things that can actually get to the root of the problem rather than just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it. Anyway, so in phase A of the program, what they do is they teach you kind of the use of your equipment, right? The tech meter, the key box, the radar, alcohol sensors, your body cameras, how to use your patrol vehicle and the different equipment. A lot of very similar, but things vary across different departments. You might have a different car or a different system than you had in the academy. To use the software on the computer, codes and signals, which is your 10 codes and stuff like that you have to memorize. How to use the radio and how to navigate with the map books, miscellaneous paperwork and forms, all that kind of the basic stuff, right? Probably the least exciting type of stuff. And this is all stuff that you need to know how to do, right? And then in phase B, you'll start to go on routine calls. You gather information, complete incident reports, accident reports, conduct traffic stops, and you arrest compliant suspects. If a suspect becomes non-compliant, your FTO will probably take over if you're this green and take them over. You might assist. In phase B, you're also only on the day shift too, so you're just kind of getting your feet wet here. So phase C, they'll put you on the night shift, and this lasts for about 15 shifts. And so during this time, they teach you a lot more. You'll learn how to collect evidence, EUI usage, conduct basic investigations, use of Miranda, and other alcohol and VGCSA investigations. And then phase D, which is 12 shifts, you learn even more procedures with regard to crime scene preservation, response to critical incidents, call-out procedures for if you need to call out SWAT or canines, or if you have a fatal accident that you need the crash team for, DUI investigations, theft investigations, domestic violence, sexual assault, juvenile procedures, etc. And so that lasts about 12 shifts. So then what will happen is you'll have your final observation day. And so what will happen is on your first day, your PTO or your FTO will be with you. But they're not going to be in uniform. They'll be in what's called a training uniform, which is khakis and a polo shirt. And they're just riding around with you. They're not going to say or do anything. They're just going to take notes on what you do. The second day, you're going to be in the car by yourself. And they'll be there and they'll respond to whatever you go to. But again, they're just sitting there taking notes. They're not going to, intervene. They'll intervene if the suspect becomes, combative and stuff like that. But they're really looking for you to be able to handle these situations. And so once that is done, then you get your take-home car and you're done with training. And by the way, Kennesaw PD has a take-home car program, which is pretty cool. So you get your own car to take home, which a lot of departments don't have. You have to have a fleet vehicle. And so, you get the car that everybody else drives and all this other stuff. And a lot of people want to know or often ask me how long before you can be a detective or something like that. And so this varies from different departments. Most departments, it's 5 years you have to wait. You have to be on patrol before you can apply for one of the specialized units. At Kennesaw PD, it's actually 2 years. So you're only on patrol for 2 years before you can get into something that's a little bit more interesting and get away from the basic patrol. But they do like to keep people there because they find that, having that couple of years of, patrol work really helps to set a good foundation for building on for specializations. And even once you have graduated from your academy and your field training, you will still have to undergo in-service training. And so in the state of Georgia, police officers, in order to maintain their officer certification, have to go through 20 hours per year of in-service training. And 2 of those hours are required to be community policing hours. And so, during this, you'll have mandatory firearms qualification. If any policy changes go on, you'll have to take training on that. But then you actually get, some optional trainings. You can spread this 20 hours out. Of course, you have to do the mandatory stuff, but then you'll end up with some other stuff, left over. And so, you might want to look at interview and interrogation trainings, especially if you're thinking about being a detective later on. That would be something that a skill that you would need. Or narcotics investigations if you're interested in becoming a narcotics officer or a narcotics detective. De-escalation training is a big one, and they've actually a lot of states have started making that mandatory in the academy and in service training for officers that have been officers for a while, and I think that's a good idea. Because, de-escalation is an important thing, and there's so many times where, if an officer can de-escalate a situation, he reduces, the need to use force against the suspect, but also reduces the probability that the suspect's going to use force against him or her. So that can really be a win-win for everybody. Police officers, you don't want to get in a fight with somebody. Anybody that's ever been in a fight before knows that, you get a few punches in, but they get a few punches in usually too, and so it just, you'd much rather deal with a different situation, which is why so many police officers, now that the tasers are out, have started using that more than other non-lethal uses of force. But anyway, we'll talk more about that when we get to that. So that's kind of the basic rundown on police training, and I think I put the Cobb County PD training program on D2L2 in this module if you all want to look at that, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, if you're thinking about going into it. Usually, when we teach this face-to-face, I have a police officer come who talks about, I've had Cobb County and Kennesaw and Ackworth and different ones come who actually talk about the training program in their department, and stuff, and they like doing that because it's technically considered part of their recruitment efforts, and then you guys get to learn about the training programs too. But unfortunately, we have COVID-19, so you guys are all learning virtually this semester. So I'm doing my best here to make sure that you guys learn everything that you need to know, and I will talk to you next week. And if there's nothing else, which I think I've covered everything, so everybody have a good week, and I'll see you next time.